Insane barbaric sex lives of the Apache tribes. In this video you will learn how the Apache people gave power to Apache females. As a result, women held a high position in the social hierarchy. This also means that there are rigid obligations for men. Married couples would move into the house of the wife's parents and the husband would be bound to the wife's family. Who are the Apache? The Apache tribe lived in a large region called the Gran Apache area, which covered territory from western Arizona to eastern Texas, and from northern Colorado to Mexico in the south. Since the region was so large, the Apaches naturally divided into two main groups, the eastern and western tribes, and the Rio Grande River served as a natural dividing line. Today, the Apache are mainly located in reservations in Arizona, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. The name, Apache, is a word the Spanish used to describe them, and it means, enemy. The Apache had many other names for themselves, including, Inda, which means, the people. They also were made up of many independent tribes, and each tribe had their own name for their specific tribe. Some tribes were the Lipan, Lamita, Conejero, and Trementina. A brief history of the Inday. Traveling south from Canada hundreds of years ago, the Inday, Apache, people joined the Sonoran Desert region of the Pomeria Alta around 1200 AD according to most historians and linguists. The Inday people refer to themselves as Inday, Inda, Tinday, or Tine, which means, the people. The term Apache that is commonly used to refer to the Inday people actually comes from the Zuni word Orpachu, which means, enemy. This nomadic people were considered enemies of many communities, both native and European. Why did so many people have an antagonistic relationship with the Inday? The Inday worldview supported the idea that the land and environment around provided resources for their use and collection. Traditional Inday lifestyle, which was highly nomadic, didn't leave much room for intensive agriculture or accumulation of large amounts of animals or other foodstuffs. Thus, when resources were running low, or when their own hunting and gathering efforts were not sufficient, the Inday made use of the resources that belonged to their neighbors. The goal of Inday raiding was simply to acquire goods they needed, which was to gather a few cattle, some horses, maybe some baskets of vegetables or other goods, and to escape away undetected, not to hurt others. The Inday people only engaged in violence with other tribes or communities when they were caught during a raid, and only when they had the advantage. Gender roles. This scrappy group were much more than nomads. They were fierce hunters, raiders, and warriors. These three factors made up the majority of Inday daily life, and women and men both participated in these activities. In fact, women in Inday society traditionally played a highly important role in economics, cultural and religious customs, and in daily life. Inday women were traditionally responsible for the construction and maintenance of the dwellings known as wickiups, dome-shaped structures made from willow poles, bent into a U-shape, and tied together with yucca then covered with bare grass. This dwelling style is ingenious because it was easy to construct, tear down, and travel with. The Inday were also a matrilocal tribe, which means that the husband lives and moves in with the wife's family after marriage. Matrilocality also tends to suggest an emphasis on women's lines and lineage. This tradition gave power to Apache females. As a result, women held a high position in the social hierarchy. This also meant that there were rigid obligations for men. Married couples would move into the house of the wife's parents and the husband would be bound to the wife's family. Men primarily participated in hunting activities, while women processed hides into leather to be used for clothing, bags, and containers. Apache women wove baskets of willow, cottonwood, and sumac that could be used for food storage, eating, and cooking. Inday burden baskets are beautiful, decorated with devil's claw and yucca, as well as buckskin fringes. They were woven and worn by women. Connected to the land. The Apache people developed an intimate relationship with their environment. They relied on nature for their food, clothing and shelter. Apache children learned the different plants and animals and their uses as they worked alongside their mothers. At about age 7 or 8, the boys were separated from the girls to learn different skills. The girls continued to work with and learn from their mothers and other women. Basket weaving required that they become versed in the different reeds and grasses, as well as plants used for dyes and paints. Plants were of utmost importance for medicinal uses. Many young women would go on to become herbalists and healers. Boys, on the other hand, started learning how to hunt and become warriors at age 8. They were required to identify plants, learn the habits and characteristics of animals, and study the cycles of nature. Often, they were required to observe nature or stalk animals for hours. Becoming a warrior also meant that they needed to become masters of hiding and escape, for which an intimate knowledge of the local geography was needed, so much so that they learned the location and names for specific trees, rocks, caves and geographical landscapes. The Apache people today. There are many culturally related and federally recognized Nday tribes in the United States today. While all of these tribes share linguistic and cultural roots, they are politically and geographically distinct. The Nday nations speak several languages and now have unique cultures. Various traditions have remained the same in Nday society for hundreds of years. Some of these cultural features include the young women's coming-of-age ceremony known as Na-ihs, or the sunrise ceremony, and the infamous crown dancing ceremonies, which are used to commemorate important life events and for social events. Other parts of contemporary Nday society have changed and grown to incorporate parts of American culture, like Christianity. Today, many Nday people celebrate long-held traditions of their ancestors. Nday people are highly respected. They preserve the traditions, culture, customs, and values and morals of their tribes and communities. They also participate in farming, ranching, and service and tourism activities. One of the largest sources of revenue for many Nday nations are casinos, which provide many jobs. At Tumakathori, you are most likely to enjoy Apache culture at the annual fiesta, where the crown dances are a perennial favorite. Crown dancing is used for social dancing, healing, and to commemorate important life events. The 4 black masked dancers represent the 4 directions. The 5th dancer is the clown, who protects the others by driving away evil spirits. Symbols are chosen by each dancer to adorn their headpiece, usually referring to forces of nature. Only men are allowed to train to dance. Apache politics. Historians believe that the Apaches came to Southwest America sometime between 1000 and 1400 CE. The Apache tribe was broken up into many smaller tribes. The basic unit for the Apache was extended family. These family groups acted completely independent of one another. Extended families stayed together in a group and were led by the most important member of their family. That leader was the chief advisor and took care of the entire group's affairs. Many groups of extended families lived near each other so that they could unite for social, religious, and military purposes. They would decide on a band leader for the combined group whenever they met up. The Apache was never a unified political union. The very loose-knit organization of the Apache tribe caused many problems for them throughout history. It was very difficult for them to have good relations with the Spanish, Mexicans, Americans, or other Indian tribes. This was because one Apache band might make peace with a nation or tribe, but another Apache band would remain at war with that same nation or tribe. This caused confusion among the Spanish, Mexicans, Americans, and other Indian tribes, and they would often retaliate against the wrong Apache band. Conclusion. The Apaches were a nomadic group that originally lived in a very large territory in southwestern America. They were made up of individual extended family groups that were each independent. This made their history with other peoples very complicated. When the Spanish came into their territory, some Apaches raided them and other Apaches wanted peace. However, when the Comanche tribe pushed into their territories, the Apaches fled their traditional lands and sought protection from the Spanish and, later, the Mexicans. Things got worse for the Apache when the United States took over their lands. The Apache Wars began, with the Apaches led by their famous leader Geronimo. However, the United States eventually won, and the Apaches were put on reservations. Although they dealt with many hardships on these reservations, when the United States government started helping them in the late 20th century, the Apaches started slowly making a comeback, which continues to this day.